Hello and welcome to the program. Ukraine has prepared the package of documents on denunciation of the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation with the Russian Federation, signed back in 1997. What will change with the treaty denounced? To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Yuriy Ruban. He is the head of the main department for Humanitarian Policy of the presidential administration. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So just for the viewers to understand in a bit of context, what is in this treaty exactly?
Well, this treaty in 1997, you mentioned that year. That time, let me remind you that President Yeltsin in Russia was, we hoped, at least, that in Russia was developing its own democratic process, and in Ukraine, President Kuchma was in the situation of redefining the relations with neighbors, and of course the biggest problem, let me again remind you, the biggest problem was the biggest Ukrainian border, of course it's the border with Russian Federation, and so there were very complicated negotiations, of course, about the borders, about the status of Azov Sea, Crimea, Russian fleet in Crimea, and so. And again, some points of these discussions were, for example, where they had been put out of the frame of this treaty, but others were solved on, let me say, with some mutual understanding. Mm-hmm. And this agreement was signed and it was ratified in 1998 by a Russian parliament, as Ukrainian, of course. And so at that time it seemed as the base for the future relations between Ukraine and Russia, as it was told in the preamble that the relations must be based on mutual understanding, on mutual respect, respect for the borders, recognition of the borders, recognition, well, at least, for example, recognition of the Ukrainian borders, including Crimea, and so. Mm-hmm. But
we know what
again,
happened.
Everything. It was for many years, but one day Russia teared it like the sheet of paper, and so we started to redefine our basic relations with Russia.
Which brings me to the next question. Why denouncing it, having like this package of things now, as why not doing it in 2014 when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and led this conflict in eastern Ukraine? Why not beginning this process earlier than today?
Well, you better consult with lawyers, but generally speaking, or on a political level, I would say in such a way that the Ukrainian position from the very beginning, it was the position that was supported by United Nations, by, let me remind you, something like 111 countries voted for the resolution of General Assembly and so on. It was that Russia must show the respect for international law, and this treaty was the part of international law. It was ratified and so on. By the way, it was put as the United Nations was the depository of such documents and so on. And so the idea of the first position, and it's let me say the position according to the law, to bring Russia to the necessity to fulfill this agreement. I guess that according to this position, Ukraine used this agreement as to strengthen its position in different international courts. Mm-hmm. You know, there are different...
So as a legal basis to bring
for
it.
this. Again, we use this, I guess, again, you better speak with Ukrainian lawyers. Again, I guess that there is something like the pyramid, of different kind of suits in the different courts and so on. But now we are in the position, in political situation, which is dictated by timing. Simply because each 10 years we have to prolong it or to declare that it is irrelevant, and we stop and we get out of this agreement. So I guess that in the situation of...
and it's been 10 years.
Just it's after ratifying, I guess it was ratified in 1998, so it's just 10 years. So this is the reason why it was 20 years, and this is the reason why it has to be reconsidered, and this is the position of Ukrainian side, strictly according to this to the norms of this agreement itself. The package of documents had been prepared, and I guess it will be sent, of course, to Russian side. But again, this is the Ukrainian position that will be presented to the international community.
Now, denouncing this agreement, what will it bring? Because the situation is already known today. Russia is illegally occupying Crimea, and also is leading Russian-led forces in Donbass. What will it change in Russia's attitude? How can it pressure Russia in that matter? Is it just a legal piece of paper, or can it have real means over Russia's policy? No, I fully agree with you that, first of all, it's legal, But the second is, I would say in such a way that Russia, the core of Russian position is something like gambling. When all the time Putin is increasing the stake in this game. Or they occupied Crimea, then they occupied some the part of Ukrainian territory. They so what are and in all his negotiations, he is let me say, testing the partners. Do you accept my stake or not? In this case, I like it personal again. It's let me say, because it's the relevant answer that Ukrainian side doesn't want to be, let me say, minor gambler or in the minor in this game, and we have our own position. If you don't want to fulfill the agreement, so it's not an agreement. No more agreements.
Yeah, no more agreements.
Now, does it imply to stop any kind of exchange with Russia anymore?
Excuse me?
Does it imply to stop any exchange, any interactions with Russia anymore? How does it help with the dialogue with Russia, if dialogue is possible?
Well, that's a complicated issue. Again, as I meant, let me back to your first. First of all, it's a legal situation. It's legal situation. Sometimes, you know, our real life doesn't in our real life. Not everything is being defined by the law, by the agreements, and so on. Of course, there are some. Of course, there are some economic ties, you know, and that's again there are some. Let me say, a human dimension in our relations and so on. But I guess that after the announcing of this agreement, the whole legal base for, let me say, for human, for economical, for others would be abolished. And so it will create the fully new situation.
Now, and to conclude this interview, what is the next step after denouncing this agreement? Let's say this agreement is denounced, it's stopped. What's next? What's happening
next? Well, I would say in such a way that, well, Russia is not going to fulfill this big agreement. Okay, but it was signed. Okay, it was signed in 1997. It was another situation. So. In 1915, again, in Minsk, other agreement or other obligation were taken by Russians. So, okay, if you, we put aside this, okay, we put it aside. So, the obligations that were taken personally by Mr. Putin, face to face with the leaders of France, of Germany, Ukrainian side, so they are on the table. The question is, does Kremlin, let me say, really wants to fulfill this agreement, this much more new agreement? Again, there are Ukraine put on the table for our proposal, for example, about the mission of United Nations, peacekeeping mission, and so. Are you going to, the question for Russia, are you going to fulfill these new agreements? Are you going to develop new base, at least, as you mentioned, new base for the relations? But relations that will be, again, must be based on the mutual recognition, at least, of the internationally accepted borders.
And well, then we will surely follow closely this situation. Thank you for joining us in studio. It was a pleasure to have you today.
My pleasure.
That was Yuriy Ruban. He is the head of the main department for humanitarian policy of the presidential administration. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.